Hello, friends. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome on over. Let me just switch over to here. Hi. Let me just fix the captions thing real quick. Hello. My friend John will be joining me in just a moment. But let me just go ahead and get this started. Hi. Hi, friends. If you are on the It Gets Better channel and you did not just come over from my live stream, just a note to let you know, I have just had a really bad allergic reaction a couple days ago, which is why my face looks like this. And my friend Rob's in the background because he's visiting me from America. So he sort of has to be. I can't really get rid of him. He sort of won't leave me alone. So yeah. Hello, everybody. Can a mod please do like a pinned message just to say about my allergies? And that's why my face looks like this, so that anybody who might want to know knows. Because it's kind of gross. Sure, it'd be helpful for them to be able to know. And I believe John is already waiting for me, so just give me 1 minute to just get this ready. Webcam. Try to figure out. Nah, this one. Okay. Capturing the wrong display, which is why there's an issue here. Let me go ahead and switch over. I may have done it. I've done did it, I think. I done did it. There we go. And then I'll lock it in place. Okay, let me just go ahead and unmute and say hi to John. And then we can chat. Okay. Hello.
Hey.
Hi. Are you good for me to switch the cameras on?
Yep. I got my camera on.
Cool. Let me just go ahead and transfer these over. And just so you guys know, I'll actually before I put the cameras on, let me just grab this. I'll send James the giveaway link, and sort of in like 10 minutes or so, James, if you just want to just dump it, because I won't be able to go back to Discord. If you want to just dump it in the chat or something in like 10 minutes or so, that would be cool. Okay, here we go. There we go.
That's not me.
No, Rob is over there because he's in my actual house, guys. Ignore him. We don't want Rob. We want John, who's here, look. Oh, yeah, it's got the wrong name on it. Yeah, it's got the wrong name on it. Because the last time you joined me, it was you, that's why.
How dare you.
It's because the last time you joined me, it was you. I'm just going to put John. There. Sorted. What is your actual username now on Twitch?
On
Yeah.
Twitch, I think it's John Williams 09 or 9. Let me just double check that. Twitch.tv
We're just double checking, guys. Just double checking.
JON Williams 09.
Sorted. Thank you. Okay, here we go. So we are here. We are queer-ish, and we are on the Twitch. Okay, so John, I've sort of told you a little bit about It Gets Better before, and like the channel and stuff, and you guys all watching obviously already know sort of like what this channel is, and we do a stream on here literally every month, so I'm sure you guys are probably used to that by now. But I wanted to specifically because you guys literally asked me questions with regards to actually, just before I continue that thought, in case you're watching the stream, John, I had a really bad allergic reaction a couple of days ago, which I've told them out already, which is why I look like this.
Gonna be honest, I'm not looking at the stream at the moment, but that's fair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, then you're fine. Anyways, so for those of you in chat, you guys are always asking me questions all the time about specifically advice for like coming out to parents and things like that. And all I ever say to you guys is, you know, I don't know your parents. You got to make sure that you're safe. You don't want to put yourself at risk with your parents in case they're not accepting or whatever. Obviously, you don't want to risk potentially being homeless, or, you know, there's all sorts of different risks you could take. But I'm not a parent, so I can only really give you the advice that I would have from the standpoint of a child of someone else, of who I'm very lucky. I have, you know, quite accepting parents. So I brought in backup, guys. I have an actual parent who is here. Yeah, I've got an actual parent here who also has LGBTQ plus children, to share insight. So what I normally do with these streams is before I just sort of talk at them, I normally let them ask questions first, and then after that I sort of talk at them.
Yeah.
So if you guys want to start off by asking any questions, particularly they can be about anything, but in particular if it's about LGBTQ plus experiences with parents, specifically if you are wanting sort of insight or thoughts, I suppose, into talking to your parents about things, or I guess if you want to ask John how he reacted to his children being LGBTQ plus or things like that, you can ask first, and then we'll sort of just go and start talking a little bit about that topic freely afterwards. If you don't, just ignore Rob awkwardly sat there. I know it's off-putting. Just don't look at him.
Wow.
Just don't look at Rob. I'll just hold like my cloud over him. Everything's fine. A whole mental
So
cloud thing.
I don't even know where you're streaming this at. So
It
I'm
gets
not sure where to-
twitch.tv/itgetsbetter.
That's right. I remember you telling me
Let me-
this, but I forgot.
Pop out the chat so I can actually see you guys as well. Poor Rob, indeed. Okay, so
No.
if you have any questions or anything you'd like to share, you can go first now. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes to see if you want to, and then my mom is a huge conspiracy theorist. I don't know how I would come out. So just for clarification before I respond to that, when you say conspiracy theorist, like everything that happens in life she thinks is a conspiracy? Like she thinks that like there's a reason, like a very strange and twisted reason why everything happens, you mean? My father told me I could tell by the way you're dressing, plus it says in your diary. Ooh,
Oh, lovely.
that's icky. That's a lack of trust. That's kind of icky. I always feel a little bit uncomfortable when I think when parents say they're like, well, I kind of could tell, because it's like sort of feeding into stereotypes there of what people expect LGBTQ people to act like or look like or dress like in your case, which isn't always the case. You know, you can have men who dress more feminine and act more feminine who aren't gay, for example, or, you know, women who dress more masculine and aren't necessarily lesbian. I think that, like, feeding into those stereotypes is a little bit of a shame. I know in your case, obviously, you actually are whatever it is that you're identifying as, but I definitely don't think it's, in my opinion, very... I'm not a parent, but based on John's reaction too, I don't think that it's a very fair thing to read your diary. That seems like an invasion of privacy. And obviously, I do think you're entitled to your privacy too. Yeah, she blames the LGBTQ plus for everything. Okay, this is the person who was talking about conspiracy. So about coming out to their mom, who is a huge conspiracy theorist and blames LGBTQ plus people for everything that goes bad in the world, basically. So, do you have any thoughts on that one?
As far as that goes, I mean, it's like anything. When you have a issue with parents of that variety, where it's, you know, I don't know how you get around that. My daughter's fiance has this problem wherein her mother and father are massively against LGBT anything.
Yeah, I remember you telling me
and
this actually.
will spend a lot of time basically making her very uncomfortable. So she still to this day has not told them anything. And she's an adult.
So that's a shame, really, that she feels like she can't even talk to her parents about such a huge part of her life. That's really not very nice.
Yeah, I mean, she's gotten engaged and everything. They don't know anything about it. They still think they're just roommates. So, yeah, it's not fair. It's not fun.
So, Jamie,
And,
I would say, Jamie, probably the same thing I say all the time then. It's going to be one of those things where it's like, you got to decide if you think you're safe. You know, if you think that your housing situation, your home life could become volatile, or you could be unsafe, you could become potentially homeless. If like anything like that could possibly happen, then I think it would probably be best that you keep, you know, those things to yourself for now, as hard as it is, to not come out, and then perhaps wait until you're in a position where you are able to not, you know, rely on your parents so much for providing you basic necessities, essentially. Like, for example, if you go to college or you move out or anything like that, obviously at that point you know that you don't need your parents to approve of you in order to be safe. I think that's the most important thing. And unfortunately, you just gotta see and hope that they are accepting of you, or at least come to accept you. And if they don't, we talked a lot about this in the previous stream that I did, but we talk a lot about chosen family, and sometimes when you lose your biological family or your whatever family, legal family, because of these things, you will be surprised how quickly you will find a space filled with people who love you and appreciate you for who you are, and become like what we call your chosen family, which is people in your life, you know, who are supportive of you, just like a family should be. But you chose to be around them versus, you know, being born into that family. And I do believe that no matter what, you will find those people, even if you don't have them right now. Okay, so this is an interesting one, because, right, so John, do you want to just, if you're comfortable with this, do you want to just tell us, for the LGBTQ plus children that you have, because this question is a bit specific, if they're both you and them are okay with publicly, obviously you're not going to tell them any private information, but if you want to share with us what they identify as.
So my oldest daughter is a lesbian. My youngest daughter is non-binary, and my son is bisexual.
Okay.
So, and I have 3 others who are het. So, you know, they're
yeah,
normal.
So many kids.
That's the wrong word, but you know
Lots
what I
of
mean.
opportunity.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. So this particular question is could potentially apply to your non-binary child, which is, it says, how difficult is it for you to adapt to like gender change with one of your children? So obviously this one said like gender change from daughter to son, but most in your case it's non-binary. I guess sort of how you feel about that, how it you know, how you as a parent handled that experience, I suppose.
Yeah, so one of the biggest adjustments at the end of the day is knowing. So it's going to be different as a child. Your opinion and your understanding of things will be different than as a as the parent, right? So as a parent, you have to make decisions like that. You have to know in advance what your opinion is going to be. You can't just go into it and randomly come up with, oh, I'm going to react like this, because it will affect your child and how they look at themselves as well as how they look at you. And I've had a relationship with my own parents, which wasn't ideal all the time. So I know how that feels to be in a position where you can't get, you know, the recognition or the parental respect that you feel you deserve to have. So my experience with that, because my older daughter actually at one point didn't know whether or not she was transgendered, or she was you know, exactly who she was as a gendered person. And we had a lot of discussions about it, because for a while there it was confusing to her. And I said, you know, whatever, at the end of the day it comes down to where you're feeling comfortable, and it takes time. It's not straightforward, as in today I'm this person, tomorrow I'm that person. It's, for me anyway, I always said that it was more, you have to take some time and think about it, because when you're younger, it isn't straightforward. Things change in your life dramatically depending on friends, school, home, relationships, and all of those things matter. So we've talked about this. My youngest daughter doesn't like her name. She wants to be called by a different name. Have told her flat out, it's difficult for me to say that, but it's not difficult for me to respect her opinion. But it is difficult for me to remember that she has a different name that she would like to be called all the time. So sometimes I just call her by her normal birth name, and then she doesn't react to it, and after a while has just kind of said, no, it's fine. But, you know, initially she was quite annoyed with it and got quite upset. But it wasn't like she was, or they were trying to, you know, be a transgendered person and I was ignoring that. It was more around the feeling of trying to be who you are and trying to be recognized for that. So it's a difficult process as a parent as much as it is for a child. You can't, you know, it doesn't just overnight flip a switch and you're like, oh yeah, I'm good. You know,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
more difficult
it definitely
in
takes
that
time.
environment.
I have accepting parents, but it still took my parents probably, I don't know, it was definitely a good year, maybe 2 years before they sort of stopped using the wrong name accidentally, or sort of found that easy to for it to come naturally. Definitely was even longer than that before they like nailed down pronouns. You know, it takes time. But I think it's important to, like, exactly like you just said, having open communication with your child and being like, you know, this is hard for me. I respect it. I'm okay with it. I'm gonna try, but it's difficult. And then obviously them also recognizing and understanding that, you know, they're going through difficult things that you understand. You're going through difficult feelings and processes that they understand. I think that's the best way to have it, isn't it? It's better than being like, what? Nope, I'm not doing this, or you know, not telling the truth about how you're struggling with it. I think one of the things that my parents really struggle with is at first my mum was like not necessarily against it, but she was worried about how the world was gonna perceive me, and so she just flat out was like, this is the worst thing ever that could possibly happen to our family. And even though that's not how she was actually probably feeling, she just didn't know how to process that. And whereas my dad was like super accepting, but I know now that at the time he had a lot of stuff that he was finding hard, but rather than being honest about finding hard, he just wanted to like blindly be accepting, which can also sometimes be not so great, because that means there was a lot of like emotions to process that he didn't process at the time. And so I think like you said, having that open communication where you really, you know, you talk about it, you're like, I respect you, I accept you, it's hard for me, I'm going to try, but it's going to be difficult and it's going to be a process, but you know, I'll get there in the end. We just need to work on this together. I think that's the best way that you can possibly have these things, where you both have open communication about what's difficult for you, what's okay, what you're going to work on, and you just work on it together. And I think that that is a really helpful way to go about it. I think it's a healthier way to go about it, because if you're both just blindly like, I'm not going to try, this is unacceptable, or vice versa, sometimes it just doesn't help when you don't talk about how you're feeling. So I don't know if you are a parent that was asking that question or not, but obviously every parent is going to choose how they want to approach any situation with their child, not necessarily something like this. Obviously, being a parent, I'm not a parent myself, but I know I have been a child and been a teenager, so I know that it is a lot of curveballs and it's a lot of figuring out as you go along, because you know, you never really know what's gonna come your way. But I do agree with John, like he said, about having your opinion on this type of thing preemptively sort of decided is probably a good thing too. It's probably good to think about how you are going to feel if your child one day does come to you and tell you that they're trans or non-binary, or that they're a lesbian, or that they're gay, so that you kind of already know how you feel on what your standpoint is on that, I guess, beforehand, so then you can start working through those emotions of, I guess that transition phase in your own head, because even if they're not necessarily trans and they're just gay, for example, it's still sort of a transition in your own head, I think, because every parent sort of has an idea of what their child's going to grow up to be like, and then you sort of have to process that maybe they're not going to be the way that you had originally expected or thought of, and you sort of have to reprocess all of that and have that sort of transition in your own head. I think it's always going to be a process, because kids throw lots of curveballs, but I think open communication is a really good way to process it. I think I would have liked it better if my mom, because my mom explains it to me now how she felt then, and I'm like, I understand, I get that. I wouldn't have been as angry with her, but because she just sort of like seemed so unaccepting at the time, and was just flat out against it because she was worried about how the world was perceiving me. My mom, for context, sort of tried to closet me further and get me to hide what I was feeling, and I didn't come out publicly nor start transitioning for like 2 or 3 years longer than I wanted to. I waited longer because my mum sort of insisted that I do it for her, that I don't transition until, like, you know, get through this part of school first, or finish this first, or graduate this first, or I started my first job and still hadn't even publicly come out at my job, which I wanted to do from day one. I didn't want to go to my new job and not be already out, if that makes sense, and have to come out at that job. So it was very difficult because I closeted myself even longer on my mom's behalf because of her fears. But at the time, it felt like she was just anti-trans and very against me and against everything I was going through, because she just didn't communicate that. She didn't tell me that the reason why was that she wanted me to do these things because she was afraid of how other people were going to treat me. Instead, it made me feel like she was the big bad mean world that was treating me badly and refusing to acknowledge me and refusing to accept me, when in reality she was trying to protect me from other people, probably more so than she needed to. But obviously it's a big process to go through that sort of it's not quite the same as me coming to my mom and being like, I'm gay, which is already a difficult thing to process. Coming to my mom and telling her that I'm the opposite gender to what I've identified as my entire life and what she's assumed of me my entire life, and that I was going to transition, is obviously quite a massive process for her to accept. I just wish that I do wish that she'd have had that open communication with me and told me why she felt the way she felt. Because now my relationship with my mum is incredible. We have a really good relationship because we communicate. But at the time, it was really, really poor. We didn't talk to each other. It was really miserable. We were angry with each other all the time. And generally speaking, we just didn't really even speak to each other for a long time. And this is why I think in all things in life, it's true that communication is so fundamental in everything you do in all your relationships. Because any kind of relationship without communication is probably going to struggle. So, yeah, that was basically a long-winded way of saying I think that any, way that you can openly communicate how you're feeling and also try to understand how they're feeling is the best way forward, I think. Nervous Wild said, how did you react to your kids coming out?
So here's a funny thing about that. So with my oldest daughter, I knew she was a lesbian before she did. So it was very easy for me to kind of see what was coming because of the way she talked, because of her interest, because of how she was already reacting to certain things. It was very easy to tell by the time she was 11 that that's where her interests lied. That's where her relationships were going to lie. And so it was a very easy transition. It was easier for me than her, as it turned out, because she said to me she was surprised and never actually understood that I knew well before she did even. And so when she came to confess that she was a lesbian, I just said to her, I know, we've known this for a while. You're not telling us anything we didn't already pick up. With my youngest daughter and my son, that also we knew ahead of time. If you spend a lot of time with your kids, you will observe things about them that become fairly obvious fairly early. It's just sometimes we blind ourselves to that. We don't want to know that they're like a certain way. Or
Yeah.
sometimes with some kids, if they're very shy or very inward, it's harder to know what they're thinking, right? So you don't get it all the time. So keep that in mind. Everybody's different, so everybody has measures. But with my children, especially with my younger 3, it was actually quite easy to tell, okay, this is not the same as, when someone says, oh, I see the kissing scenes between the boy and the girl, and I think it's gross and I think it's yucky. But yet when there's 2 girls kissing on screen, I'm staring at them like, wow, that's kind of a clue that something might be up. And it's kind of that way with my youngest daughter. She had no interest in any of that, never has had interest in that. She's talked openly about the fact the only way she'd ever want to be around children is if she was caring for someone else's. She's no interest in relationships, may never have an interest in a relationship. And those are the kind of things that you have to, as a parent, adjust to and kind of rebalance your expectations and your thought process. And it does take time, but I think it's possible. But to go back to your last point that you were mentioning earlier, for my wife and I, the biggest thing that we did was before we got married, we started talking about this. Before we even had kids or we even talking about kids, we were talking about, when we do have children, what is our opinion on this issue or that issue? And gay and lesbian and trans all came up at that point. So it wasn't a surprise or a shock. Both of us had had family members that were gay. So we weren't like deluded into thinking that just can't happen and that we need to be rational about things, because we'd seen parents that weren't rational about it, that were idiots about it, that did things that I fundamentally disagree with because they disagreed with the choice of their child. And we decided long ago that was never going to be the position we were going to have. So it's not easy, but it's a whole lot better when you're prepared for stuff than if you're just assuming it's all going to be the same way you think it is. Do I expect everything to happen the way I want? No. Do my kids do things I'm not happy about? Yes. Is it to do with their gender choice or sexuality? No. It's other things they do that annoy me,
Kids.
But yeah, they're kids. That's what they do.
Yeah, I think I think that, I mean, my parents are now, they always say that they knew that, like, when I was younger, that there was something about me that probably was different in a way, you know. They knew that I was probably going to be LGBTQ plus of some form. But I think that when you go through things and you sort of don't want to accept it, especially what my mum went through, which is like the fact that she didn't want to accept it, I think it's easier for you to pretend that there's very obvious cues, I guess, weren't there. But then now she says, like, they obviously were there. She just, at the time, she was afraid, so she was refusing them or ignoring them, you know?
Mhm.
So I think,
Yeah.
I think that when you are an LGBTQ plus positive person in general, your kids coming to you and telling you that they are LGBTQ plus probably is not going to faze you very much. You know, it's probably just going to be one of those things that it's like, right, that's fine, you know, whatever. I'm glad that you know how you feel, and cool. Basically, I think that it's
Yeah.
nice when you're in that position.
And I do understand your mother's position about being nervous about the acceptance of the rest of the world, because
Mm.
definitely that is something to be worried about to a degree. But at the same time, you can't hold them back from being who they are. It doesn't help you or them, and your relationship
Mm-hmm.
deteriorates because of it. And, like, I just feel like it's important to understand where they're coming from and say, we'll do what we can to make sure that you're not feeling, at least when you're here at our house, that you can't be who you want to be.
Yeah, I think one of those things to remember when at least I would like to think that I will be like this if and when I become a parent, is that you don't want to be the things that you're telling your child that you are afraid of them coming into contact with. Because if you're limiting them because you're afraid of how the world's going to treat them, then it doesn't matter how the world treats them, because they've already at home experiencing that negativity. They're already experiencing that unacceptance at home with you already. So they're not going to be, there isn't even going to be a chance for them to experience negativity outside, because the one person that they want to support them and love them isn't, or this is how it's going to feel to them. I think the much better approach would be to be realistic and say, I support you. You are probably going to experience this negativity in some way, but when and if you do, I will be here to support you through it. That's a much more effective method than to shut them down and essentially be their bully, rather than letting the rest of the world, it's going to happen. Yes, there will probably be hate at some point, but
Mm-hmm.
being there and
Mm-hmm.
supporting them is better than being the bully yourself, even if you don't
Yep.
mean to be. Because, by not accepting your kids, or by making it seem like you don't accept them, they're gonna I know I did as a teenager. I felt like my mum was the big bad evil person in the world, because even though she wasn't outright not accepting me, because she was limiting my ability to transition and come out and stuff like that publicly, it felt like she was like the unaccepting, nasty person in the world that I wanted to be free from, if that makes sense, which massively impacted our relationship and ruined our ability to be close in any way, shape, or form at that time. I'm lucky now because we've salvaged that relationship, but at the time it was ruined. It did ruin our relationship. So,
Yep.
let me see. I've got a lot of people who said they don't fully know yet how they feel about their gender identity or about their sexuality, whether or not they don't know if they're bi, they're lesbian, whatever. And for those of you that are questioning yourselves, a lot of you, I assume, are quite young, and even if you're not young, it doesn't matter how long it takes you to figure out who you are or what you are, who you love or whatever. You can take as much time as you need. You have your entire life to figure these things out. Especially when you're young, there's so many things going on in your lives already. So many things to focus on, and all of the things that you're going through. And like John mentioned earlier, there's so many things that are going on outside and inside your home and in your life when you're growing up. You don't need to feel like you have to pressure yourself to figure out who you are right now. You can take your time, you can experiment, you can explore, you can take time to figure these things out. Don't feel like you need to know by next week, or you need to know by a certain age, or you need to know right now. You do not need to know, and there is no time frame other than the one that you're setting for yourself. You don't have to have these like hard limits on figuring out. You don't have to like in your mind. I don't know why, but I feel like I felt this way. I was like, I need to know who I am by the time I'm 18. When I'm an adult, I need to know who I am. It's not true. You can still be figuring yourself out forever. It's like it's an ongoing process, because identity and yourself, I guess your self identity and how you feel about yourself is always changing even as an adult, we're always all changing about how we feel about lots of other things. Our interests, our hobbies, our lifestyles, they change all the time. And identities tend to fluctuate too. And it's okay for you to take time to figure out who you are. You don't need to pressure yourself so much to know right now if you're, like you said, I think that one person said they have a crush on a girl and they don't know if they're bi or a lesbian. It doesn't really matter whether you're bi or a lesbian. You can figure that out over time. What you know right now is that you like a girl, and that's okay, and there is nothing wrong with that. And if one day you realize that you only really ever like girls, then you'll probably know at that point that you're a lesbian. And then if you realize later that maybe you like boys or whatever else in that process too, then you're probably actually bisexual or pansexual. But it's okay to figure those things out later. What you know now is the fact that you have a crush on a girl, and that's great, good for you. You don't have to pressure yourself to label that right now. You can take as much time as you need to figure out those labels if you want them, or you might decide that you don't want labels at all and you just want to enjoy your life and focus on, you know, your feelings, and that's fine too. You don't have to pressure yourself to figure out the exact words to describe how you're feeling right now. Sometimes it's just nice to just feel and just exist and just grow around those feelings, you know? So,
And at the end of the day, you might feel one way and experiment with that. And like you said, change your mind at some point. And there's, that every individual I know has to go through that. It doesn't matter what their preference is, it's always going to be a developing process. And you have to accept that in yourself, first off, so that you can understand it and not jump all over your nervousness or concern or whatever, and just let it figure itself out. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be better for you if you're not sitting there having to struggle with that. Like, as a short example, my father was left-handed growing up. This was a very long time ago, back when they used to force you to learn how to do right-handed, because that was normal. And so they forced him to learn how to write right-handed and how to use his right hand. So now, into, many, many years later, he's right-handed, but it was something that wasn't natural or normal for him. Well, this is no different. You can't force yourself to do something that you're not interested in. There's loads of examples of people that did, and it wasn't happy. So better to take the time and understand. You got loads of time.
Absolutely. What's the difference between aromantic and non-binary? Well, one of them is a sexual identity and one of them is a gender identity. So a non-binary person is somebody who feels that they essentially don't fit into the definition of the two binary genders, which is male and female. So they may identify as a plethora of different things that better describe how they feel about themselves and their self-identity that don't necessarily fit the expected, I guess, social constructs of male or female, essentially. And aromantic, I am not very good with fully understanding this sort of stuff, because I need to generally just need more research on it, because I don't really know people who are aromantic. But I'm fairly sure it essentially means that they just don't have an interest in being in a relationship.
No, yeah. Not only that, they're not interested in typically, depending on the level, they're not even necessarily interested in sexual contact or any sort of contact that's anything more than a friendly relationship.
They're basically mostly just interested in platonic relationships with people, like being friends, and
Yep.
they're fulfilled enough by having friends and family in their life and don't feel they need a partner in many respects, which is different for everybody too. So, everybody is different. Everybody has, like John said, different levels of how they feel about certain things. So a lot of the time it can be, you can be all sorts of different levels of how you feel and identify. And really, you'd have to ask the individual person specifically to find out how they necessarily feel. But the difference, which was the question you asked mainly, is that one is a sexual identity and one is a gender identity. And they're both different things for that reason. When I was younger, I did something against my family's rules. They looked for my phone and found out that I thought I was a lesbian and responded very negatively about it, saying they didn't think I was, and now it scares me from telling my family anything like that now. So I'm assuming that was a while ago then. This is a very common thing. You'd be surprised at how often some stuff like this happens. Like, there are people who will tell, say, their family when they're younger that they're a lesbian or that they're gay or whatever, and then maybe their family don't react the way they wanted to, or the family thinks they're too young to know that or something. And so you never bring it up again, and so it's just never sort of being talked about. But then you realise as you get older that actually, yeah, you were right, and you are a lesbian or you are whatever. And I understand why you might be afraid, especially if they had a negative response the first time. If your family gives you reason to believe that they would likely be negative again based on their responses to other LGBTQ plus people in the world, or experience in movies or shows, or you can usually get an idea for how your parents feel about certain things. And if they very obviously are not, supportive of those things, then you may want to hold off on telling them again until you're in a safer position where you're not necessarily reliant on them for your safety, just because to put yourself at risk. If generally speaking they seem like they're accepting of LGBTQ plus people around you, or in movies, or in society and stuff in general, then you may find that you are in a position where you can tell them, but that's going to be something that only you can decide, and you should just always make sure that you put your safety first above everything else always, and hopefully things will go well for you. What does the Q in LGBTQ plus mean? It can mean queer. Some people use it as questioning. It sort of depends. That's why people usually say the plus, so that people can just sort of encompass everything without anybody feeling left out. Let's see. My parents think I'm too young to know what I am, even though I know and I'm comfortable with it. I think sometimes I think it's a complicated thing, because for some reason people think that you can't know that you are gay, for example, when you're younger, despite the fact that they themselves will probably admit that they knew that they were straight at that age themselves. The reality is that there's a lot of like negative teaching about LGBTQ plus people that came up over the last few decades, that a lot of our parents and older people have been exposed to, and it's very hard to undo all of those sort of pre-existing lessons or ideas that they have in their minds about LGBTQ plus people, and it's very hard to bring them into a world that we grow up in now, where we know that these things are very normal experiences, and that there's lots and lots of people who are very different and identify differently, and get them to understand that. It's not necessarily very easy for them to understand that. And I think one of the teachings that sort of came from that time period that's been the most difficult to undo has been this idea that LGBTQ plus youth can't possibly know that they're LGBTQ plus at a younger age, which I think is completely untrue. I definitely 100%, for as long as I can remember being conscious, knew that I was not like everyone else, if you know what I mean. And at least that's how I thought in my head at the time. I knew that I didn't know what LGBTQ plus meant as a young child, but I knew that, I know looking back, that that's what I was feeling. I just didn't know, like, I knew I was trans when I was a kid. I just didn't know I was trans. Do you know what I mean? Like, I knew that I felt it. I just didn't know the word for it, because I didn't know what being trans was back then. If I'd have known, then I'd have known that that's what I was experiencing. But when I look back and I think about how I felt as a kid, I know that that's what I was feeling. I just didn't know how to describe it. I didn't have the words to describe it yet. I think that...
I knew back in middle school that I was attracted to boys and not girls. So.
Sorry, Rob in the background said that he knew in middle school that he was attracted to boys and not girls. So, I think... I don't know, obviously, I'd rather you don't share your age in chat. I don't know how old you are, because privacy reasons, but... chances are, if you're here watching the stream and you're able to verbalize how you're feeling, you probably do know how you feel, and that's perfectly acceptable for you to understand. But obviously, as I always say, you shouldn't, rush yourself into feeling or labeling things in a certain way. But by the sounds of things, you kind of already know how you feel about yourself and your identity, and there's nothing wrong with that. Unfortunately, if your parents don't believe that you're old enough to know that you're probably not going to change their mind anytime soon. But you know who you are, and that's what's most important. I have a friend who doesn't want to have a relationship. And doesn't want to have a relationship. She has some trouble. She doesn't know if she does or doesn't. She's figuring out whether she's a lesbian or bi or straight. I think, like I said, sometimes it takes time to learn how you feel about yourself and accept yourself too. Because we do grow up in a world that kind of, in a lot of ways, makes you feel like you feel wrong for being LGBTQ+, even though it's perfectly normal and not wrong. Sometimes you also have to accept yourself as well in the process. And sometimes it's not just figuring out who you are. Sometimes you already know who you are, but you just haven't accepted it yet. And sometimes there's that process of accepting who you are and accepting yourself too. So, you know, it's not easy. It's complicated, but you'll get there. You just got to keep pushing forward, and over time, you'll figure it out. I've always known that I'm bi, and my partner knows that, and of course it's completely comfortable. I never came out to my parents, not because they aren't supportive, it's because they will tell me to break up with my long-term partner to make sure I am bi. They feel like since I'm young, I need to figure it all out now. They mean well, but it can be frustrating to be closeted around the people I love the most. I'm a bit confused by why they feel that you would need to break up with your long-term partner in order to know for sure. I'm assuming they mean they think you should have experiences with both genders before you finalize your future. But being in love with somebody and knowing your own identity are not the same thing. They're completely different things. You can be in love with somebody and not know your identity yet. You can also be in love with somebody and 100% know that you are also interested in people that are not of the same gender as the person you're in love with. There is nothing wrong with that. It's completely normal. And it's another situation where it would be up to you whether or not you feel like you would want to explain this to them or try to get them to understand. But if you think they're stuck in their ways, it's not worth it, then perhaps it's just easier to just go down the route of what you have been. But I do think that being closeted in any way is unfortunate. I don't think you should have to be. But that depends on whether or not you want to fight the battle, I guess, of trying to explain that to them. I don't know. I think I've had this conversation with John before, actually. I feel like that would be kind of like you trying to explain the same thing to your parents. It might be a little bit of an uphill battle. But it might be worth it in the end if you know that they're accepting people. That's kind of up to you. Let me see. I have a friend who's bi and another friend who's against it, and she doesn't know how to come out to her, but she doesn't want to lose her as a friend. Well, I say this all the time when we talk about this particular topic, but if you are afraid to come out to your friend because your said friend is homophobic and you don't want to lose them as a friend, I don't personally understand why you would want to retain your homophobic friend, because they are not a very good friend. I don't think that any friend who actively goes out of their way to make you feel miserable about your identity, about something you have absolutely no control over, something so fundamental about yourself, I don't know why you would, in my personal opinion, want them to be your friend. They sound like a terrible friend. I would not want to have a friend who is against who I am. If I for example, all my friends know I'm trans, and I'm fine with that. In the public, obviously, when I go out throughout my daily life, I don't randomly go to people and be like, by the way, hi, I'm trans. Like, when I meet people in public, obviously, that's none of their business. But my friends know I am. I would not retain any friends who were not okay with that, because that would put negative energy into my life, and that's an energy you don't need. I think your friends should be more concerned about finding and retaining the friends who are supportive of her than trying to keep a friend and also adapt who she is around her friend, as well as hiding who she is around her friend in order to keep said friend, when actually said friend is the one with the issue, not her. So, personally, I would not want to keep that friend. So, yeah. I have a friend who's bi. Oh wait, I just read that one, sorry. There is no rush to figuring out your identity. It takes time. Most people don't have it all figured out, and isn't a bad thing. Yeah, exactly. 100%. I mean, it's not even just about like identity and gender identity and like sexuality and stuff. I have had conversations with John at length about how, like, even when you're way into your adult life, you still don't fully know what you want from life sometimes. Sometimes we want to just hit reset and start all over again. Sometimes we just want to do something completely different to what we're doing right now. Adult life changes drastically. I'm sure John can tell you that.
I can tell you one thing about it, which is the secret to adult life is you are still learning and you're still going to make changes. And every time you think you know better, you learn very quickly you don't.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it works.
I mean, when we're adults, we're sort of just, we're basically kids still, except we don't have parents telling us what to do next. You just sort of figure it out yourself. So, like,
Sometimes you still have parents
well,
telling you what to
yeah,
do.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes. Or partners, or just other people in life in general who may have an idea of how your life should be or how it should go.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe helpfully so, maybe sometimes unhelpfully so. But I think, you never really I don't think you ever really know what you're doing. I don't think any of us do. I don't think any adult really 100% knows what they're doing. A lot of us are just taking every day as it comes, and we find success and enjoyment and fulfillment in the things that we do know what we're doing, such as our jobs, that we know what we're doing every day. You know, some jobs you don't, but most of the time, your job, you know how to do your job, you know how to, keep up your general hygiene, you know how to do there's things in life you know how to do, and you'll just keep doing them. But like, I think most of life is coasting through it. Most of life is just taking every day as it comes, taking each thing that's thrown at you and making decisions on the spot. Sometimes you can't plan in advance for everything. Like when you have kids, for example, they will bring so many curveballs to you that you will have to, on the spot, make decisions about that you have no idea how that's going to shape the future life that you're going to have. But I think that sometimes that's the beauty of life, that your life can change down so many different paths in literally an instant. You don't need to feel like you have to have everything figured out right now, because the truth is, when you become an adult and later in life you'll realize this, you're never really going to have everything figured out ever. So we put so much pressure, I think, on young people, especially in schools, to figure out how they want their lives to be for the rest of their life. But in reality, you're never going to really know for sure, like, or have everything figured out for sure, really ever. Like, your life is always going to be changing and twisting and turning, and there's going to be curveballs thrown at you all the time, and, things happen all the time. Your car might break down tomorrow and you've got to figure it out. Your house, I don't know, it's got too expensive and you want to move. There's a flood, there's a million different things that could possibly happen. You want to leave area because you got offered a new job. Like, there's just a million things that could possibly happen literally in an instant, and your whole life can change. And I think if I could go back and tell my younger self, like, the best possible advice, I think I would say, stop trying to figure everything out and instead honing on those skills and abilities to adapt. Instead, try to learn to be good at adapting to how the changing world around you will affect your future decisions and your future life, versus trying to figure everything out. I wish I could go back and be like, stop listening to your teachers who are telling you need to know exactly what you want to be in 10 years time, exactly what job you want, where you want to live, what house you want to earn, and everything else you want to be able to do in like 10 years time, and instead learn how to adapt to the fact that life is going to throw a million different things at you, and it's not going to be about where you expect it to be right now, but instead it's going to be about how you take those changes, take those curveballs, take what's thrown at you, and work around it to keep going. Because it's just sort of, life is just it's kind of a mess when you're an adult. When you're a
Yeah.
kid, you want it to go past so fast, don't you? And then when you're an adult, you're like, I wish I could be a kid again, when
Slow
nothing really,
down. Yeah.
nothing really bothered me.
Yeah. For me, I think the only thing I would add to what you said is use your time to learn skills, not focus on one particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're really, really interested in it, then go ahead. But if you're feeling pressure from home or from teachers to make decisions, I guess the first thing I would say is it's key that you learn the skills that will make things easier for you later. I left high school not knowing what I was going to do. It took me 4 years to figure out even if I wanted to go on to post-secondary education. When I went to university, it was kind of like I knew what I wanted to do, but when I graduated from university, I didn't even do the degree I took had nothing to do with the job I have. I mean, it does tangentially, but not really. And so you can never guarantee. So you just have to pick up abilities and skills as you go along, and then it's like a video game. You learn as you go.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I think
there's just no cheats. That's all.
yeah, I think that's the best point really, is to think like you got to try and do things you are good at, but also things you enjoy. Because when I was in school, for example, I picked a lot of subjects for my qualifications that I was okay at or good at, and I knew I was probably going to get good grades in, but weren't necessarily things that I actually enjoyed. I picked them because they were things that would make me more employable, I guess, or at least what I thought would make me more employable. But ultimately, I ended up hating them. I got lower grades than I probably would have if I'd have chosen something I loved, and they have not been useful to me in life later. Really, you want to try to balance between things you're good at and things that are useful to you, but also things you like, things you enjoy, things that bring you joy in life. Because as you grow up and get older, you're going to very quickly realize how much that qualification or that choice that you made for something that you thought was going to change your life and make your life better, even if you didn't love it, is actually something you probably will grow to hate and never want to touch or go near again. Whereas the things that you enjoy, the things that you love, the things that bring you genuine happiness are going to be the things that are going to get you through all of those rough times in life and help you to find, you know, ways around those complicated things that happen. Because doing something you love is so much more important. And I think that when you're older, you definitely realize that. I think when you're young and you first start working, and especially from school and stuff too, there's so much pressure to feel like you need to make as much money as possible, and you need to make sure that you've got this right, and you've got this pension sorted out, and you've got this savings account ready, and you've got this house that you earn. And then really you realize very quickly, actually, these things are important, yes, but they're not more important than me being happy. Because if you're miserable to get all of those checklist things done that the world tells you need to do, then what's the point? What's the point in doing all of that? Because you've just wasted all of those years being miserable. I realized that I was spending so much time focusing on trying to figure out how to be the most efficient human possible because of like this like pressure from school and things like that, that I was missing out on so many things I actually enjoy. For like 3 years of my life, all I did was work constantly. From the age of like, I don't know, maybe 20 to 23, all I did was just work constantly, every hour I possibly could, because I felt like that was what was going to unlock this perfect future. But actually what it did was make me miserable. I stopped enjoying all of my hobbies, I stopped spending time with my family, I stopped spending time with friends, because all I was doing was working all the time, and it doesn't actually bring you the joy that you think it will. Instead, focusing on doing things that you really love and with people you really enjoy being around, it's so much more important than trying to force yourself into all of these boxes that seems to be expected of you when you're young. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to like figuring out your identity. People make you feel like you need to have that figured out by the time you're 18, then have met somebody by the time you're 20, and then be married by 25, and then have kids by 30, and like, you know, maybe not those exact time frames, but there seems to be all these time frames and all these expectations on everything all the time. But in reality, you don't actually have to meet them. You only have to do whatever makes you happy. So just take your time. Breathe. That's the best thing I think I could say to do, is breathe. Take a moment to just breathe and just, you know, exist for a while. You don't have to feel so pressured. Also, yeah, if I miss your message, feel free to copy paste it, Nova. That's fine. You can resend it if I missed it. That's fine. No problem. Trust me when I say it's not worth keeping homophobic friends around. It can be almost like torture. It will. Exactly. It will. It will just end up making you sad. Don't try and change yourself for other people just so that you can keep or retain a friend who doesn't really even care about you or your identity or who you really are. No good friend is going to want you to pretend to be somebody else so that you can be around them. You want friends that love you for who you are, and whatever you are, and whoever you love, no matter what. And so I personally would not be trying to adapt in order to avoid losing a friend because they are homophobic, for example. They're not worth your time, in my opinion.
It's just going to make you miserable at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Find things you love to do and give you joy because they will help you when life gets difficult. Exactly. It's completely true. You want things that make you happy to uplift you when things feel tough. Hi Freya, no problem, welcome on in. I've been drawing for more than half my life, and I hated it. But the first time I put my hand on a sewing machine, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. If you know you're artistic, but you're forcing yourself to do something artistic that you actually don't even like, you know, or there's lots of other examples of that. You don't have to force yourself to do something. Like, for example, here's a similar example, actually. I always wanted to speak another language, so I forced myself to take French classes at school because that was the only language that they offered at my school. I hated the language so much. I just can't get my head around French at all. And so after I left school and did really bad with the language, I decided, yep, obviously I'm never able to learn a language, there's no point. And then as an adult, I decided to start learning Spanish because I have friends who speak Spanish. Turns out I love Spanish. I really enjoy learning the language. And had I just allowed myself a bit more time to figure that out, perhaps I wouldn't have ended up spending 3 years of my life learning something I hated. You know, I forced myself to do a lot of things at school that I really, really didn't even like. And now I'm older, I just wish I'd have gone with things that I would have enjoyed more instead. When I tried to come out to my mom as lesbian, she got upset with me and told me how much she wants grandchildren and wants to see my wedding with my husband. It made me so sick that I told her again I'm not interested in men, and now she won't talk to me. I'm really sorry to hear that, and obviously it's not the reaction that you would hope for, but I do want to say that, you know, there will be people around, whether you have those people now or don't have those people yet and you haven't met them yet, there are people around who will support you for who you are and will love you for who you are. And as much as I know it's unfortunate, sometimes we do lose people because they refuse to accept us for who we are. And at first, it definitely won't feel nice. It will be very difficult at first. But over time, I think you will eventually come to terms with the fact that it's not worth trying to hold on to people who just refuse to accept you and don't love you for who you are. Because ultimately, keeping those relationships will just make you feel miserable in the end. I'm not sure how to react to responses, but my mother has always been against who I am. For example, I'm bisexual, and her response to it was that it's a phase. She would always threaten to move me schools or do things to ruin me as a person if I was ever with someone she didn't like. And now she is being accepting after like years of not being accepting to who I was and am. And when I mean years and years, a long, long time before moving, so I'm not sure how to react to it. So you mean like she just sort of like flipped a switch and was accepting suddenly? And so you're confused about that? Thoughts, John?
Sometimes for some people it takes a long time. Maybe they have an experience that changes their mind in a way that they didn't maybe think about it before. It might be an outside experience. Maybe they know someone who's in your position that they didn't know before, who taught them, you know, this is why this is the way it is. You know, you'd have to speak with her to get to know that. I don't know. Obviously, everybody has different experiences, right? But from my experience with it and dealing with people across various cultures and societies and languages and everything, I think you have moments where, as you get older, where you have ahas, and those ahas can happen, you know, when you're 60, 70, 80, as much as they happen when you're like 5 and 6 and 7 and 8, you know, just because you may have made a decision early in life, it doesn't mean you can't change that opinion later in life. So I would keep that in mind. Maybe they've just grown out of that idea. Maybe they've been taught by someone else. Maybe themselves, they've kind of sat down and had a question of themselves about it. Or maybe they're just reading things and starting to figure it out. Best thing to do, I guess, would be to ask them.
There's a very good chance that perhaps your parents decided that they want to be supportive of their child and have a good relationship with you, because if this negativity and this negative reaction to your identity so far has caused a rift in your relationship, they may well have decided, I need to do something about this, I need to learn more about this, I need to understand better, because I don't want my relationship with my child to be non-existent. So there could well be a very genuine positive reason for that change of heart, because it may be that they're trying to repair their relationship with you. They may want to try to fix that so that you're not fighting, I guess, or have a negative experience with each other. Hi everybody, by the way. I went to a new school and I started in September, and I have no friends in the new school, and everyone's very homophobic, and I'm gay, and I'm finding it hard for me to adapt to everyone and fit in and not be and not be gay. I hate trying to make friends and feel horrible about being myself and making my mom feel guilty making me switch schools. Okay, first things first, you can't not be gay. So that's the first thing you're going to have to accept is that you can't change who you are for other people.
I have tried it. It does not work.
It doesn't work, and it will make you absolutely miserable. And by the way, people say exclamation point enter in the chat. You seem to be confused. You are not on my channel. You can't do that. James sent a link in the chat a minute ago, guys. That doesn't do anything. Sorry, let me just, before I continue talking, that does nothing here. I don't know what you're doing, but that's not gonna do anything, guys. Unless James told you to. No, I don't think he did. No, the link that James just sent, guys. Guys, you're saying exclamation point enter for absolutely no reason. You need to click on the link that James sent you. Okay, I'm just gonna keep talking because people are gonna keep doing it anyway. Okay, so anyways, yeah, so first things first, you can't not be gay. You can't just stop being gay. It doesn't work like that. Obviously you can hide it if that's something you decide that you want to do while you're at school, but it's probably going to make you feel very upset, and rightly so, I understand that. When it comes to school is a difficult time. I was bullied mercilessly at school. It made me absolutely miserable, and I understand how difficult that is. But I definitely think talking to a trusted adult will help. Whether that's, say, like a head of house, a counsellor, head of year, whatever it is that you have at your school. I think that you may find that it feels really homophobic now since you've started there and the experiences you've had with people so far have been negative. But that doesn't mean everybody's like that. That doesn't mean every single person there feels that way. There may well be other kids around you that are looking for friends or need friends too that are experiencing very similar things to you. And in fact, there may be people who are just too afraid to come out because they don't see a lot of people being themselves there. If you're already out and you were at your previous school, I don't think it would be helpful for you mental health wise to go to this new school and closet yourself essentially when you're used to not being in the closet, if that makes sense. And also by being open, you may well open doors for other students and other children to feel like they can come out too. One thing I would say is I would have a look and see if your school has any kind of like youth groups. I know that lots of schools have like groups you can go to, like at say lunchtime, for example, to join and participate in with like other people that are going through similar things. It doesn't necessarily have to be an LGBTQ plus one, but you might be able to find a group that's just genuine with people who are struggling socially. Like maybe they've been bullied themselves and they're just struggling to make friends. And you might find that you find it easier to make friends there in those type of situations. It might help you to join some of those groups and participate with some other people who are also struggling in social situations in school. And I think that you know, it might benefit you to do that, but I really do think it's going to be hard for you to like force yourself into the closet when you're used to not being in the closet, if that makes sense. And you shouldn't have to either. You shouldn't have to change who you are or hide who you are from other people in order to fit in. Those other people that have a problem with it, they are the problem. They have the issue, not you. There's nothing wrong with you because you're gay. There's something wrong with them for the fact that they're refusing to accept that you are and being nasty to you. That's not acceptable. It's not an acceptable way to express their own confusion or lack of understanding by being nasty. I really do think you would benefit from speaking to a trusted adult. I think that would help you a lot. And however that may be, you know, guidance counselor, head of house, head of year. I don't know what you guys have in whatever country you're from, but I think that it might be beneficial to you to, you know, talk to somebody so you can talk about how you're feeling and what you're experiencing. I think my parents / dad knows I'm gay / trans. We haven't talked about anything and I can't be sure, but still. Was that like a question, User Steven, or are you just sharing that with me? I wasn't sure if you wanted me to like respond to that or not. I think that parents should be interested in the child's sexuality / gender and wanting to respect it. I think so, but also some children don't necessarily feel ready yet to talk about it. So I think it's important, like to not necessarily, you might know, like John mentioned earlier, you might have a very strong inkling about how your child, you know, feels. But sometimes it's better to let them come to you because you don't want to make assumptions. You don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. And sometimes they might just not be ready to talk about it yet. So sometimes it's nice to let them come to you.
And quite often they don't necessarily know. Like just
Yeah.
because you have a suspicion, it's something I actually tried to talk to my wife about quite a lot because she had a suspicion about our youngest son. And I kept saying, well, how about we let him figure out whether or not that suspicion is what his actual feelings are, rather than putting on them, oh, you're definitely gay, when they may not be gay, and as it turned out, they weren't gay.
Yeah.
So, all those things need to be sort of balanced. You can't just make assumptions, and you have to let everybody needs time to adjust to whatever
Mm.
their situation is. And hopefully they'll come to you. If they have a relationship with you that they feel comfortable in doing that, then you can do that. If not, then the other option is you can, as a parent, bring it up at some point. Like I used to do this with my oldest daughter, where it'd be like, you wouldn't directly say, you know, oh, you're a lesbian or whatever, but you might say, so what's your interest in this? What's your interest in that? Da 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 da.
Yeah. Make it
And,
known that that you accept it.
yeah, and they'll figure out themselves where they're at, and then hopefully they come back and talk to you. And as I said, if they don't, then you can kind of talk about it without talking about it, and then hope that in the conversation it kind of brings it up.
Yeah. I think that, like I said before as well, as I knew how I was feeling when I was younger, but I didn't know the word to describe how I was feeling. My parents did ask me, well, my mom asked me once if I was gay, and so I ended up coming out as gay because I guess it was planted in my brain that that was sort of like probably what I was feeling, and so I ended up coming out as that as well because I kind of thought that my parents wanted me to be instead of being trans. And so I sort of ended up coming out as that because they'd made that assumption, if that makes sense. And so sometimes I think it's better to wait for your child to come to you. You can make it known and make it clear that you are accepting of LGBTQ plus people, but it's probably not smart to, or not very good to assume and sort of push for a specific thing, because if you're wrong, it might make them uncomfortable. They might question if they are presenting themselves incorrectly or something, and then start to wonder how they should be, or they might not be ready to talk about it yet. It's sometimes, I think always it's probably better to just let them come to you first. You can still make it clear that you're okay with it, that you're okay with LGBTQ plus people, without making the assumption out loud that you think that your child is, or that your friend is, or whomever else it is in
Whatever.
your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you may find out that what you've done has actually made things worse.
Yeah, and also that's another point that Audielli just made as well. For a lot of people, coming out with something is a big moment for them. So for parents to sort of assume and ask, or for anybody really to sort of take that away, and by asking you, it can sort of remove the importance of coming out from the person, and sort of take it away from them, when really they've probably wanted to do it in their own time, versus sort of being, railroaded into it too early before they're ready to. Because it's also a very personal experience figuring out who you are, and sometimes people want to have that personal experience by themselves for a little while before they're willing to sort of share it with everybody else, you know?
Yep.
So,
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's their, it's something they have to decide. You can't decide it for them. No matter how much you see something, you just can't make an assumption. So it doesn't mean you can't say, so how are you feeling? Try and get them to talk. That's not the same as forcing a decision out of them or putting them in a box. It's no better put someone in a box to say you're definitely this or you're definitely that than it is to put them in a different box and say you're definitely a heterosexual person who definitely should get married. It's the same box, it's just a different label.
yeah, exactly. James, if you want to go ahead and send our giveaway link from the previous stream, if you want to just go ahead and send it on my Discord server, because people keep asking about it in the chat, and this is not the stream for it. Obviously, we're supposed to be talking about LGBTQ plus stuff, and some people just keep yelling it in the chat over and over again. So you can just go ahead and send it on Discord if you like. Other people can't send links, Nova. It will delete your link. Let me see. I came out to my mum a few years ago, and I always knew that she would accept me because she gave me no reason to not trust her, but it still took a lot of courage because I didn't want anything to change, but nothing did, and now I can involve her in my life more. That's really nice, Bunny. It is really nice. Obviously, like, that's the hope that everybody would hope to have, is that their parents would be accepting, that they're like that they're experiencing their life and their relationships wouldn't change. I definitely think that's something I feared as well. As I always felt that my parents would be accepting. Unfortunately, obviously, at first my mum struggled, but I always had hopes that they would be accepting, based on the fact that growing up, my parents. Oh, 1 second.
Playing all songs.
Somebody hit one of my speakers and started playing Conan Gray very loudly, so I just didn't want any copyrighted issues, so I had to sort that out. So what was I saying? Obviously everybody would hear that that would be the result that your parents would have. My parents had always been accepting of other LGBTQ people in public and around the world, and like in TV and in movies and stuff like that. So I never suspected that they would have any issue with it. I was actually very shocked that my mom was not accepting of me at first. Like I said, I now know it was because she was afraid of how the world was going to treat me, and not that she was unaccepting of what I was actually going through. But I was actually surprised by that experience, because my family had always been so supportive about LGBT people growing up, that I never expected that they would be unaccepting of me, if that makes sense. There is a sign in my school that says that's so gay, so yesterday. Words can hurt, choose them wisely, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. It's nice that they included that. That is something that when I was a kid, it was like such I'm sure many of you guys around my age or a bit older than me will know, but it was so common for people to refer to like mildly inconvenient things as gay when I was a kid, like calling something that's mild, like they broke their pencil, but like that's gay, you know, mildly inconvenient things that really have no means to be described like that, using that description for it. It is very odd. It was a very strange and random thing for people to do, and I'm glad that people don't really do it as often anymore, but it is a very strange way to act. And one thing I would say is that if you are saying things like that around certain people, do try to think, especially in public, who could be listening to what you're saying, because you could accidentally upset somebody else without even really meaning to. There's so many other words you could use to describe something that's mildly inconvenient instead. Let me see. I have a friend who is exposing their gender, and they use new pronouns almost once a week. They don't tell you their pronouns straight away when they change them, and I don't see them very often. When I do, I never know what pronouns to call them. Oh, exploring, not exposing. Sorry, I misread. Exploring their gender and using new pronouns. I was very confused. When I do, I never know what pronouns to call them, but if I ask most of the time, they don't know themselves. What do? Do I use no pronouns, use they, them, or something else? I would say use they, them. Just be neutral. Because then you can't lose, essentially. Like, you're not going to hurt anybody by being neutral all the time. So I feel like, you know, so this is how I feel. If you use neutral pronouns towards somebody, there is no grounds to becoming offended or upset unless that person then responds and says, no problem, thank you for being neutral because you didn't know my pronouns, but my pronouns are actually these pronouns. Please could you use those instead? If you then still use neutral ones after they've directly asked you not to, then I think that might be a slight problem. But if they don't know the pronouns themselves, or if you don't know the pronouns of somebody else, then being neutral is perfectly acceptable. For example, if you call me they, them because you don't know me and you hear my voice or whatever, maybe you're not quite sure and you don't want to offend me, I will not be offended whatsoever if someone uses they, them pronouns to refer to me. I'll be like, that's fine. But I will probably say to you, if it's very likely that I'm going to see you again, I will probably say to you, by the way, my pronouns are she, her, because the likelihood is the person isn't 100% sure about my gender identity, so they've used they, them, which is very respectful and very kind. I will then respond usually and be like, by the way, my pronouns are she, her. If I think that it's likely I'm going to see this person again, or I'm going to communicate with this person again, so then they know. If you then, on purpose, continue to refer to me as they, them, instead of a she, her, after I've asked you to use she, her pronouns, I'm probably going to be a little bit upset about that. The first time, probably not so much a horror, but like just as a reminder, by the way, my pronouns are she, her. If it came to the point where you were continually using neutral ones and you've got to know me and you kept using neutral pronouns, say you worked with me, for example, in a workplace, after I had over and over again, it told you my pronouns, I think at that point I would be upset. I think I would feel like, you know, you're doing this on purpose. It seems weird. It makes me feel like you're like, I don't know, against trans people or something. You know, I would probably start to question whether or not you were against my identity or something like that, or didn't agree with me. I think that would be annoying. But I think if you don't know and the person doesn't know themselves, or they haven't told you anything else to use, then using neutral is probably just the best way to go, because you know, you avoid offending. It's definitely going to be way more offensive if you call someone he, him, who actually identifies as she, her, or vice versa. That's obviously going to be way more offensive than calling someone a neutral pronoun and allowing them to tell you instead the pronouns that they use. Also, obviously in this situation you said you can't just ask them. In most situations you can just ask people as well what their pronouns are. But actually, okay, so this is a very individual experience, and I know we encourage asking of pronouns, but actually, as a trans woman, when people ask me my pronouns, sometimes I actually feel kind of upset, which I know probably sounds silly, but I would rather somebody just assume neutral pronouns and use them and allow me to correct them to she, her, than ask me my pronouns, which is not necessarily the general consensus. Not everybody, not a lot of LGBTQ plus people agree with what I'm saying here. They feel like, you know, asking is perfectly acceptable, which I do think is acceptable. Sometimes being asked my pronouns makes me feel different though, and that makes me feel sad sometimes, because I like to think that 99% of the time in my life it's very obvious that I identify as like in using, you know, in stereotypically female ways, and so I like to think that people would default to she, her for me when speaking to me, and I think many trans people who've transitioned straight from one, you know, gender to another, to like the opposite gender, would probably agree. Sometimes if somebody asks me my pronouns, it makes me think like, wait, is my voice too obvious, or like, do I not look feminine enough today, or something like that. Sometimes I prefer if somebody just uses the neutral ones until I correct them versus asking me my pronouns. But everybody's individual, so you can talk to your friends or your family or your significant other or whomever it might be who's experiencing, you know, whether it's the question of the gender identity, or that they are transitioning, or that they've got an alternate gender identity, whatever it might be. You can talk to them and they can tell you exactly how they feel. They can tell you what they're okay with being called and what they're not okay with being called. You know, for example, a good example, I believe, if I remember correctly, Dylan Mulvaney uses their birth name still. She uses her birth name that she had before transitioning, because you know, whatever reason she decided to, so therefore she's okay with being called her birth name, for example, whereas someone like me is absolutely not okay with that. You know, there's everybody's different, and I think it's important to ask people what they're okay with being called and what they're not being okay with being called. So if your friend doesn't know what pronouns they are using each day because they are, you know, you don't see them that often and they're experimenting with different pronouns, perhaps just ask them, are you okay with me using neutral pronouns for you until you tell me otherwise? And they'll probably be like, yep, no problem. And or they might tell you, no, actually I'd rather you did this instead, because I think communication is really important, especially when it's somebody you care about. It's nice when someone comes out, because I think it's more comfortable than them being too fussed over, through the support being there. It's so comforting. I think, yeah, so for many people, coming out is a really freeing and exciting but also nerve-wracking experience, so it's nice to not take that away from people. Let me see. I'm Christian, but also LGBTQ+, and I was at church today, and the pastor started talking about how multiple genders, etc. was bad and such. I felt so awkward, I guess, and like I was wrong. I mean, I know I'm not, and I know it's fine, but it felt so terrible that they were talking about stuff like that. Okay, so Mika, I will say that obviously some churches and some places are not as accepting as others. I would say that, you know, I don't know if you're an adult or not, but if it's certainly when you are an adult, you can probably find a church that is more accepting of LGBTQ people. They definitely are out there. There are plenty of churches that you can go to and congregations and things that are much more accepting of LGBTQ people. There's many that have LGBTQ as pastors and things now too. So if the one that you're at currently makes you uncomfortable, when you're in the position to, I would maybe consider switching to one that would make you feel more comfortable and accepted, I suppose.
I'm not really. I don't go to church as like a patron or whatever you call it. I don't know what you call it. But the church that I used to do, we used to do community theater to raise money for like community outreach programs for the poor. So we would do it at the church, and because they had a large rec room that we would put the stage in, and they would serve dinner and stuff, and then we would make money, and whatever money we raised, we donated to the church for the poor. But they were a very open church. They painted all their doors rainbow colors. They told everyone like everyone's welcome here and whatnot. So there are definitely places that are like that.
I think most of that came through the mic, but in case it didn't, basically
It
Rob.
did, yeah.
Yeah, it did. Okay, there you guys. There you go. So basically, Rob went did like community theater at a church that was really accepting. So they're definitely out there. There are really accepting churches out there that can make you feel a lot more comfortable. Let's see. I haven't come out to my mom yet about being bisexual, but I think she kind of just knows because she used to ask me a lot if I thought a certain girl was cute or a certain boy was cute. There was actually a time when she told me she dated and lived with a girl for a while, so I was planning on coming out to her, but I just kept overthinking it. But now I feel like there's no need because she seems to already know that I'm bi. I think that Moonlight, you will know when you feel like it's the right time, and it's okay to take your time. You'll know when you feel ready to come out. Don't come out just because you feel like it seems silly not to. You should come out when you feel ready to come out. Let me see. Let me look through. It's like if you talk about somebody and you don't know their name, you might point at them or something, but once they tell you their name, it would be strange for you to just point at them. Exactly. Yeah, that's a great analogy, actually, yeah. Like with my pronoun-related thing, when I said that, like, I wouldn't like it if someone referred to me neutrally if I'd already told them what my pronouns are. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing. It's like if I told you my name, but you still get pointing at me and being like, that one, even though you know my name, it would be sort of like similar sort of thing. It'd be a bit strange and weird and disrespectful to do that to somebody when they've told you already how to refer to them. I haven't told my parents that I haven't felt comfortable with my gender I was born in, so now I'm just a little nervous to tell them because I will not know what the reaction will be from them and their feelings about it because I want them to accept me for who I am. I just don't know the reaction if I tell them or if I'm ever ready. Yeah, again, it's sort of like a thing where you have to think about whether or not your family are accepting people. But if you know that they are and they accept other LGBTQ plus people, you may not need to be as worried as maybe you are. But you will, it's difficult and you gotta be ready for it. Unfortunately, I'm not an adult, so I can't do anything about it right now, but I appreciate the advice. Of course, once you are one, if you do still want to continue going to church, there definitely are churches out there that will accept you. Any help with a 6-year-old asking if someone is a boy or a girl? I don't like how I handle the situation. I said it doesn't matter. Asking people can hurt their feelings. Oh, I don't have children, so John.
I think the key to it all is just when you have a quiet moment with your child, say, these aren't the kind of things that you should be saying. Maybe you can just ask me before you start pointing or shouting or saying anything that may be unwelcome, shall we say. And, unfortunately, kids do bluntly say stuff and aren't really, there's no built up cultural, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. So it's just a case of maybe being a little stern isn't the right word, but just being more direct with them and just say, no, we don't say things like that. We be considerate of other people is how I would describe it. And it's the kind of conversation that can lead to better conversations. Even at 6 years old, they can still understand some stuff. And once they sort of understand, it hurts. I guess the biggest thing I would say is like, well, it hurts that person's feelings if you say they're this or that. So you need to be careful about saying this or that. I think that they understand because they themselves get hurt feelings. It's a lot easier for them to sort of interpret that better than if you say, well, you shouldn't say that, because the next question is obviously going to be why.
Yeah, so that's in regards to like them asking the child asking somebody, like going up to somebody and being like, are you a boy or a girl to somebody, obviously it's not. It's, I mean, generally speaking, it's not really something we would say is an acceptable thing to really just randomly go up to somebody and ask. So, what about, John, if they're asking the parent instead of asking the random stranger, if they're privately asking their parent, is that person a boy or a girl? I think they're also asking how they should respond to the child.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where it comes back to. I think that's, and if you don't know, um, I guess you just be honest. You say, I'm not sure, and it doesn't really matter. Is how
Yeah.
I would usually talk to small children about it.
I think that's the most
And
important thing, isn't it? Making sure that it's clear to that you as the parent, you are not bothered. Like you don't find them to be strange or odd or out of the
Yep.
ordinary. You just like, I honestly I don't know, but it doesn't matter.
Because the reality of it is, kids are smart. They pick up on stuff. If you're acting weird, if you're being uncomfortable around someone, they're not gonna just blissfully be unaware. They're gonna know. So you need to be cognizant of that and just kind of roll with, understanding that those questions don't come from a place of, annoyance or upset, but more just like honesty. And, that's the way I would deal with it from my perspective.
Yeah, they said sounds good. I was just walking the thin line of making sure she didn't feel like she was getting in trouble and also wanting to keep the communication open, but also making sure she understands that other people's feelings are involved and respected. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, if there's one thing kids understand is they do understand feelings because they themselves know, what it's like to have their feelings hurt. They know what it's like to be picked at or picked on, or so if you're able to sort of say, point to that as kind of the explanation, I think it's a lot easier for them to get their heads around it rather than going into a long conversation about gender, which they're not going to fully understand.
Oh, excuse me. It's Akatra, is that how you say that? You said, I've been kind of unsure of whether I'm bi or not for almost a year now, and I feel like it's either too early to decide, or if I'm wrong, I'm not sure what to do. I think that it's never too early to know how you feel, but it's also, you don't need to pressure yourself to figure it out too fast. I think, just like I said to other people earlier, you should maybe focus on just having crushes, being attracted to people, whatever whatever you feel for people. Fall in love if you fall in love, whatever it might be. And you can sort of figure out the labels later. If you decide you need labels, you might not necessarily want to label yourself. You might just want to enjoy liking people and having crushes on people or whatever and just getting on with life. You might not necessarily want to label it, but maybe later on, you might, I don't know, you might have a relationship with a boy, you might then have a relationship with a girl, and then you realize, actually, yeah, I am bisexual. You might realize you're pansexual or whatever. But I think I would focus more on the feelings that you're having versus trying to force yourself to have to label them. Because I think when you try and force yourself to label it, it just makes you feel so overwhelmed. Sorry. Remember when I said that I've got kind of a good UK sleep schedule at the moment? It's almost 9:30 and I'm already tired, so I'm like an old grandma at the moment, so I apologise. But yeah, I think you should focus on not pressuring yourself so much to have to label how you're feeling and just, live a little bit for a while. What do you think about the idea of raising children non-binary? I think that every parent should be able to make their own decision about how they raise their children. As long as they're doing so in a loving and kind environment that raises those children to thrive and be comfortable and be happy and enjoy their lives. And, I don't really think it matters. I think that children and I think parents should be able to raise their children however they want to. I think that I don't think that people are raising their children non-binary as such. I think this is more raising children gender neutrally that you are asking. Because there's people who want to raise their children gender neutrally so that their children can grow up and decide which sort of like avenues they want to go down in terms of like gendering themselves if they want to, or whether they want to remain neutral. I mean, it's not a new concept really. I mean, yes, I suppose using certain language like they them pronouns for children is a new sort of concept, but we've made baby clothes and children's clothes in neutral forms for ever. Like everybody's when I don't know about other countries, I don't know if everywhere's the same, but I know that here in this country at least, I'm assuming everywhere's the same. But growing up, I always knew that, like, you know, like when I had younger siblings, my mom would buy, before she knew the gender of her baby, she'd buy everything in yellow, for example, because yellow was not a stereotypically gendered color, nor was like white, for example. But then, like, once she found out that she was having a boy or a girl, she'd then buy blue or pink, you know, because they're more likely to be gendered. But that doesn't mean to say that my younger brothers didn't wear anything that was that was the pink. They did. They still wore pink things. I think that the idea of gender neutral clothing and gender neutral existence has always been there. It's just that right now, obviously, there are people who want to take that a step further and choose gender neutral names for their children or use gender neutral pronouns. I think that whatever you want to do is completely up to you. And I think that as a parent, as like I said, as long as your child knows they're loved, they're happy, they're comfortable, they're safe, that all their essential needs are met, I don't think it really matters what you call them. I don't think their name or their pronouns matter very much as long as the child knows they're loved, they're safe, and they all, like I said, all of their essential needs are being met. And, you know, as long as it's clear to the child as well, I suppose, that if they do decide they want to use specific things like say masculine things, then that's fine and they should be allowed to do that. Personally, in my personal opinion, now this is just how I feel about me personally, I probably will raise my children to be, you know, they will probably have gendered names and they will probably wear gendered clothes when they're young. Like if I have a little girl, she will probably wear dresses and stereotypically feminine things, and but when she's very young. But if at any point she tells me that she doesn't like those things, then I would respect that and I would change those things accordingly. I don't know if I would necessarily raise my children to be entirely gender neutral and use neutral pronouns, but then if they told me that they were not comfortable with those pronouns that they were given, I suppose, or assigned, then I would respect that. I wouldn't force them to keep the ones that make them uncomfortable, if that makes sense. But I think that it's a very complicated thing. The percentage of children who grow up and are trans is in reality very low. You know, there's this really big thing at the moment about people claiming that like trans people are sort of like, you know, forcing lots of other people to be trans and things like that. When in reality, statistically speaking, the amount of trans people in comparison to people who are not trans is very, very low. And it is a ridiculous over-exaggeration of the statistics that these people use to try and fearmonger people essentially into erasing LGBTQ plus people, which is what they've always done. It's just a consistent use of statistics essentially to blur them out of proportion and use it for propaganda. And in reality, in the real world, it's usually pretty much all crap, basically. And the reality is the chance of my child growing up and being trans as well like I am is actually very low. So I would probably raise my child with whatever they assigned at birth to begin with, until the point in which that they told me that they didn't feel that way. But I would always make sure that it was always very clear that my child could come to me and tell me that, and that it's an open space, and that the communication line is always there. And if they feel that maybe they grow up and they think that or they feel they're trans, that they know that they're in a space where they're able to tell me that, and I will respect it and allow them to make whatever changes they need to feel comfortable. But also likewise, even if my young child, say I don't know, if I had a 5-year-old girl who didn't know anything about being trans but just knew she really hates wearing dresses and she kind of just wants to wear jeans, I'd be like, okay, you know, I respect that, because children have a tendency usually to kind of know what they want even when they're young, and I would respect that.
I will say too,
Yep.
it's not just like a trans issue that people are doing the raising children as like more neutral. It's because a lot of people now have realized like that you don't necessarily have to fit into a box. Like you can be a boy and still want to play with Barbies or whatever, and that's okay. So a lot of people are trying to like get away from, oh, boys have to play sports, or they have to play with like dinosaurs, girls have to play with dolls. It's kind of like people are trying we're trying to open it up and say, you know what, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely 100%. Whether I have a boy or a girl or whatever child I have, they will all have the equal access to whatever they want to do. If I have a daughter who wants to play sports, fine with me. If I have a son who wants to do ballet, fine with me. I don't believe in this like stereotypical expectation that boys should do sports and girls should do dance classes and artistic things. Like, whatever my child wants to do, they can do. It doesn't matter what their gender identity is or their sex assigned at birth. If they tell me they want to play soccer, I'd be like, ugh, soccer? Fine.
I was gonna say.
Because I hate sports. But I'll be like, if you want to do it, then fine. If they're like, I want to play hockey, I'd be like, ugh, hockey. But then
Hey.
I'll still take them to do it. I did that one on purpose. I'll still take them
know
to
you
do
did.
it. If they want to, if they want to do ballet, I'll probably still be like, ugh, ballet. So I don't want to sit and watch that either. But I'll still take them to do it if they want to. If they want to play video games, I'll be like, okay, only for a certain amount of time per day. But yeah, you can do it. I don't care what they would want to do. I'm not interested in limiting what they want to do. I will pretend to care. I'll pretend to be interested in a positive way. I'll be like, yeah, you did really well. You kicked the ball. Good for you. I don't know anything about sports, so I can't even pretend to give you a line that a parent would say to a successful moment in a sports game because I don't know. Like you won. Woohoo.
You sports really well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would say to my children. You sportsed really good today. Well done, you. I'm very, very proud of you. You did really good athleticism. Like, I don't know what I would say to them because I don't know anything about sports, but I would try to learn. Like, I don't care about sports in the slightest whatsoever. I don't know anything about ballet, but if my child wanted to do them, I would try to learn for them. I would try to understand for them because I would want them to feel like, that they know I'm proud of them. And I'd like to know how and when I need to share that I'm proud of them. And well, I'd be proud of them win or lose, but I also feel like I would need to understand a little bit. So yeah, I would learn it. But my point here is, like Rob just said then, I don't care what toys my children want to play with. I don't care what sports or dance or what pastimes they want to do or what hobbies they want to have. As long as they're happy, that should be all that matters. That should be the most important thing. When I grew up, my grandparents, for example, my parents didn't really care. My grandparents 100% felt that I should be like the one that does like sports and play like football and rugby and stuff, and my sister should be the one that goes to dance classes and things like that. And growing up, that was hard. I find it very difficult because I hated them with a passion and had no interest in them whatsoever. And they were very much like, you need to do these things, otherwise, like, your gender identity is so important, you must play sports because you're a boy, whatever. But I think that's crap, and I think everybody should just do whatever makes them happy. And that's all I could ever want from my children, is that they're happy. And I don't care if that means I have to watch them play the most boring, garbage sport in the world. I will still support it. If my child's like, I'm gonna play golf professionally, I'll still support them. I'll be bored out of my freaking mind watching it, but I'll support. Oh god, can you imagine your child wants to play cricket? The most boring sport in the history of sports.
I mean, one of mine was quite interested for a time in lawn bowling, let me tell you.
Oh god. Or like oh my god, curling. Your child wants to do curling.
I see what's going on here.
I just can't even imagine anything worse than having to watch my child. But I would still be like, yeah, you did it. You got it in the blue circle. Woohoo. Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. Like, I would still like, but I would encourage them because I think that's what's most important. It doesn't matter if it's stereotypically a boys thing or a girls thing. They should just be able to do whatever they want, because why are they anyway? Because they're only stereotypically boys or girls things because we decided they are. They only are because society and human beings decided, you know what, that one's for boys and that one's for girls. Like, it's only because we made that decision, so we can also undo that decision and just let them enjoy themselves.
Yeah, and I will say I have a niece, a great niece, who plays football, and let me tell you, she'd beat you up if you ever said anything about that.
I would probably, you know what, knowing my luck, I'm going to end up with, like, I'm going to end up living in America, and I'm going to end up with, like, an NFL competing, like, football child or whatever, and I'm just going to be so confused. I'll still be sat in the stands, eating my sandwich and watching. I'll have no idea what's going on.
You figure it out. long and the short, you'd
Tay-Tay, that's my
learn
favorite
because you'd
sport
have
too.
to learn, but yes, it would take time.
What did you say, Rob?
I said Tay-Tay, that's my favorite sport too.
Tay. Is that a reference to Taylor Swift watching the NFL game or something?
No, somebody in the chat said.
Oh, sorry, someone actually said it.
Yeah.
Tay said, my mum accepts my favourite sport, it's sleeping. I see, okay, yeah. I like sleeping. If my child's favourite sport is sleeping, I can get behind that. And I know everything about sleeping. So that'd be easy one
My
to keep score.
My children's favorite sports are video games and usually Pokemon. Speaking of things I don't care about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care about Pokemon either. My parents are big into Pokemon Go. So, like, you know.
Yep.
I think that, like, everybody's different. Everyone enjoys different things. My children are probably going to be the type of kids that like every video game that I hate. So, you know.
We have a family Discord, and on it there is a section that is strictly Pokemon because I was tired of listening to it. And they go on and they chat away, and I ignore it quite easily.
My mom accepts me playing flag football even though she doesn't like it. What's flag football?
It's like touch football. I don't know how to explain it if you have no idea what American football is. Yeah, it's not physical, violent sort of thing, I guess.
Ah, okay. I like that. That's nice. That's a nice option for people who don't want to be like physical.
But still like playing the sport.
Yeah, so anyways, long-winded way of saying if somebody wants to raise their child gender neutrally, that's up to them. I will probably continue to raise my children in the gender that they are assigned at birth until they tell me otherwise. But I will respect them and make sure it's very clear and open that if they do feel differently, obviously I will respect that. I will probably be very honest with my children and they'll probably know that I'm trans because I see no reason in not telling them that. And so I imagine they would probably feel very comfortable with sharing that with me. I hope. And yeah, that's basically how I would answer that question. I just would let them just be themselves because that's way more important than a gender identity, I think, or like a set of pronouns. Just letting your child just be themselves and flourish and grow and do what they love. I mean, I know that, for example, when I was a kid, I was lucky because my parents didn't care and they just let me do whatever, but I just used to dress in tutus all the time and dance around. So that's obviously not a stereotypical boys thing to do, and my grandparents definitely didn't like it, but my parents didn't care. So, funnily enough, when I started working as a teacher, one of the teachers I worked with, who I've been very good friends with now, was actually a teacher still when I was at the school, because she's obviously older than I am. And she said that the one thing she remembers of me being at school is that I always insisted on playing like house, you know, like where like you have a home and like you have children and stuff like that. But I always insisted on being the mom and like cooking and cleaning and taking on the like stereotypical like 1950s mom role. So, you know, and they just let me do what I wanted to do, and that was the early 2000s. So things are changing, and things haven't always been awful. Some people are very nice people who just let you flourish and get on with what you're doing. And yeah, I think that there's more of those people now than there used to be, and there's a lot of positivity in the world, and things are getting better. And did you just hear a car, Rob?
I heard it.
Okay, that wasn't a car, that was Patrick snoring. Anyways, how do I tell my parents that I'm gay if they are accepting but share and say questionable ideas and viewpoints? As they say they would always accept, but then they will say that people think it's the trendy thing to do to be LGBTQ+. Okay, so they're accepting of it, but they say that it's a trend. Sean?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if they're accepting of it, regardless of why their perception is, I guess that's a good thing. But at the same time, you want to, I think if you show over a period of time that no, this is not a trendy, hip thing to do, that literally this is who I am, they'll get the hint, but they may be a little clueless for a while. Or they may think you're going to grow out of it, which
Mm-hmm.
they'll realize when you don't that that's not what it is. So that's something I've always said to my own kids, actually, is like, if in 3 and 4 years you came around and said something completely opposite, don't expect me to like drop over dead, like surprised, because, you might, because we all go through phases. I went through a questioning point in my life where I didn't know what my choices were, and it took time to make my own decisions. So I think that's important to give space to that.
Mm-hmm.
And if parents can't handle the fact that, if they're going to sit there and say, well, it's just a trend, you know, maybe it is, but it probably is not. And maybe be
Yeah.
aware of
And
that.
if you tell them you've known for a long while too, then hopefully they'll be understanding about the fact that you
They'll
obviously
figure it
knew.
out.
Mm.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on trans people participating in one gender sports? For example, trans women doing women's football, boxing, etc. Well, here's the thing. There are a multitude of scientific research and papers you can read about the effects of like blocking testosterone in your body and replacing it with estrogen and vice versa. The simple reality is that if you block testosterone for a long time, obviously you do lose muscle mass, you do lose a lot of your strength and things like that, and obviously by replacing it with estrogen, obviously that affects your body too. And there are a lot of studies that have proven that a lot of trans women are, don't really have the strong edge that politicians like to claim that they do when it comes to
Mm.
competing in sports with other women. A lot of
Yeah.
these like complicated things when they share this like statistics about like, oh, these trans people are winning all these medals, what they usually fail to identify and share is that when they say that like, say like for example there'll be a race of 100 people and they're like, this trans woman beat 20 people, or she beat like 80 people, for example, out of the 100. What they're not pointing out here is that means that 19 people who are not trans still beat her anyway. Right?
Mm.
So like they tend to
Mm.
say things like that, like use statistics. Like one of the most common statistics you will see is that they'll be like, this trans person came 10th and beat 50 other women. That's not acceptable. But they won't point out that 9 people came ahead of her still, who are not trans. And she lost to them anyway, despite being trans. Like, that doesn't prove that trans people are ridiculously stronger or whatever than other women, because then she would have won them, wouldn't she? Would beat everybody, wouldn't she? If statistically speaking she had the
Yeah.
better body than everybody else, she would have won every single time without fail.
It's a misunderstanding willfully of what being a trans person is. And saying that, basically it's like, oh, all these guys who've trained for years and years and years are just going to suddenly say, oh, well, I'm really a woman, and then turn and compete in women's sports.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how it works. And I think everybody would understand that that's not how it works. So
Yeah, exactly.
it's a silly assumption, which drives you crazy. I mean, while slightly different, I know a couple of I don't know them personally, let me clarify, a couple of transgender women who compete in professional wrestling. And for the one of them, I would never have even known if it hadn't have been made clear that this person was transgendered at all. And it, it didn't matter one way or the other. They're still competing at a fair level. It's just a silly. It's like the bathroom discussion all over again. It's like as if they figure that because their perverse ideas go on in their heads that they think everybody's going to do the same thing.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
mean,
just
it
stupid.
really is, in my opinion, a non-issue that's being blown out of proportion to just create more division between trans people and the cisgender
Absolutely.
community.
It's a way to other someone. That's all it is. And that's what you
Mm.
have to understand. And the way to defeat that is through understanding and sharing and giving opportunities for the younger generation to figure it out, because it'll be the younger generation that at some point will be the older generation, and they
Yeah.
will have changed their attitudes about it.
I think another thing
They
as
accept.
well
Mm,
is People say this about like this. They say it's like, oh, the burn structure or whatever of a trans person's already developed. You can't change your burn structure. But people forget that there are lots of trans people who start off like say 14, 15 with hormone blockers, then become an adult and then start taking their like opposite gender hormones. Their burn structures are not going to, or the structure of their body is not going to be very much different in, or maybe not different at all, to that of any other cisgender woman and or man, you know, if it's whichever way around that they are transitioning. It really is just a massive fear mongering of just trying to say like all these men are gonna have like this taken away and this taken away and this taken away, and what it comes down to is just a bunch of transphobic people, just like John said, just trying to other people, just constantly. Sorry, that's because I can see him, just like constantly trying to other people and trying to separate you and segregate you from everybody else, make you feel pathetic and small and separated, and just continue to push this anti-LGBTQ plus rhetoric that has been pushed for centuries.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a basic misunderstanding on how all this works.
In the comments talking about the people saying that it's trendy, like a couple more people brought it up, and like a lot of you are saying that your parents say that they'll be supportive, but they keep bringing up this thing about being gay or doing pronouns being trendy. You can, if you want to talk to them and come out to them, you can make that part of the conversation. Be like, I was hesitant to come out to you even though you say you're supportive because you keep saying that it's just a trend and it's not for me, and I wasn't not sure how you were going to take this. Like, let them know that it's bothering you that they're saying this, and that's one of the reasons why you are hesitant to come out to them.
Yep. Communication is really important, and if you have got accepting parents, sometimes it is better to just be honest with them. Just say these things that you're saying, they are bothering me. The fact that you keep saying this is trendy and things like that is upsetting me. It's making me feel invalidated, and especially because it's not based on fact, and it is just people blowing things out of proportion. And you say you're accepting, so I'd like you to educate yourself better on this, because you're making me feel sad when you say it. Yeah, Christy Callie, I definitely think that's probably going to be like a taking it higher kind of situation. I swear, that sounded like someone starting a car. Again. Every time he does it, when we point it out, he goes, I'm not sleeping. What are you talking about? It's like me remembering when I fell asleep on the Christmas live stream and I was like, I'm just eye resting.
Yeah, he says that too all the time. So yeah, I'm not surprised.
Let me see. My older sister let me see. People need to emphasize how important expressing feelings and opinions is, whatever, to whoever is close to you. Exactly, 100%. Bye, TJ. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, guys, so we're sort of coming to the end of the stream now. So if any last questions that you guys might have, or anything you'd like to share as we come up to the end of the stream before Patrick starts revving his car again. Just give you guys like a minute to send anything that you might want to ask. I know some of you love to type out really big things. Thanks you for the help, by the way. You're welcome, French fries, of course. I mean, I hope it does help. I'm sorry that things are difficult. How do I come out to my parents who don't believe in LGBT? What do you mean by don't believe? Like, they just outright refuse to acknowledge that LGBT people exist? Because that's going to be a very difficult rude awakening if they walk out into the real world at literally anywhere.
Well, and it's going to be a difficult conversation for them as well, because that's a hard thing to get around if people are unwilling to even make the smallest of steps. with great care would be what I would have to say. Feel out how far you're allowed to go before it's not worth talking about.
I think as well, Zuzu, it's another thing where you gotta make sure that you'll be safe. I
Yeah.
keep saying this all the time, but like, you gotta make sure you'll be safe because you can't put yourself at risk of being like homeless or them being aggressive or something towards you. If there's a chance that they could throw you out, for example, for coming out, then obviously it's not gonna be a smart thing to do right now because you don't want to end up in a situation like that where you're unsafe. Let me see. They don't believe that it's a real thing. Like they just think that like people are pretending or something, you mean?
Well, likely is, yeah, they just don't. They think it's a lifestyle choice, basically, to use the old term.
I think that this is probably if it's going to make you unsafe or make make it so that your basic and essential needs can't be met, that you may have to wait until you're in a position where you don't really need them to provide you with the essential things you need to survive. Such as if you go to college and you move out, or if you're in your own home or whatever. Naturally, if you go to college and they're paying for it, that may be different because they could stop paying for it. But, once you've moved out, and you're reliant on yourself and not reliant on them anymore, there's nothing they can really do at that point. Tete, I think based on the fact that you said that you had your your older sibling had a negative experience coming out, I think I would maybe hold off for a little bit. Maybe until, again, you're in a safer position. Because I wouldn't want you to be unsafe. We are in a weird generation where people who support and don't support LGBTQ plus people are in the same house and can cause clashing opinions. John, sorry?
I was just gonna say, I think that's it's like anything. Like, I don't know. There's always been situations like this, and eventually, it comes down to as we grow older and as different people are taught different things and grow up, considerations and word choices and all of those type of things will change, but it has to happen through the development of people becoming more and more accepting and being accepting of others. You don't have to look that far back to see when people used to think that people with, and there are still people that do, so let's not kid ourselves, think that different skin color somehow made a difference between who you were, or different, cultures somehow, or different religions changed you into a different type of thing, when we all know that everybody's a human being, and that's the basic standard, and that's what we're getting to, hopefully, but it's still going to be a long road with many bumps.
Yep, absolutely. This is gonna sound weird. As I'm gay, I've always felt as though I'll never find someone and feel I'll be lonely. I don't know if this is because of being made to feel as though it's not correct. Probably 100% is that feeling, yes, but I will tell you now that there are many, 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 many gay people in this world. So, the likelihood of that happening is very, very low. The only way that that could possibly happen is if you don't put yourself out there in any way whatsoever. If you hide yourself off, shut yourself off from the rest of the world, then obviously that's going to make things very difficult. But you shouldn't do that. Don't let the people who make you feel like there's something wrong with you win. Instead, you got to make sure that you expose yourself to people who are like you and go to places that have those people. Like I said, like before, like youth groups or certain areas. And I always talk about like chosen family and stuff like that. You can find people who are just like you, who accept you, and surround yourself with people like you. And I can assure you, at the very least, you'll make lots of friends. You're not going to be alone. And you will be shocked at how easy it is sometimes. Because often you find people when you're not looking for people. You'd be surprised. Well, we are up to our time, which means
Mm.
I have to shut up. So, thank you so very much, you guys, for joining us. Again, sorry about my allergies sort of ruining my face and my energy today. I appreciate that it's not the most ideal thing in the world. But thank you very, very, very much for joining me. I had a lovely time chatting with you all, as always. Thank you, John, for joining in as well. If I just check really quick before I go, I can tell you guys. Bear with me a second. My next It Gets Better stream is on the 15th of November. So I will see you for the next one then. I will be in America at the time. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful night. And I appreciate you all very, very much. And I will see you all very, very soon. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
So when you're dyeing your hair.
Oh gosh, I opened up a thing. No, sorry. I was just checking which It Gets Better ambassadors are. Oh, I just realized I can't read anyway because I'm not a mod, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you all. I love you all lots, and I will see you all soon. Have a lovely day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for chatting with us, everyone. Bye-bye. Remember, you're beautiful and wonderful and exactly who you're supposed to be. I'll see you soon. And from Rob.
And for